Okay, picture this. Elite commandos storming a presidential palace, a whole city plunged into darkness, and a world leader captured in minutes. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty dramatic piece of analysis, a what-if scenario that imagines a secret US military op and the massive, world-shaking fallout.
All right, before we get any deeper, let's be absolutely clear on one thing. Everything we're about to talk about is completely fictional. This is all from a detailed online analysis that sets this story in January 2026. The whole point is to explore some very real tensions using a hypothetical situation. So think of this as a case study, not a news report.
So let's set the scene. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Caracas, Venezuela, and the entire city just goes dark. Thousands of miles away, the American president is watching this all unfold on a live feed as his most elite soldiers get ready to do the unthinkable, snatch a nation's president right out of his own home.
I mean, the source lays this out like a movie scene. The execution is stunningly fast. You've got helicopters flying just 100 feet over the ocean to stay off the radar. Then a cyber attack kills the power grid. Next thing you know, Delta Force commandos are on the roof, they breach the building, and bam, they've got their guy. President Nicolás Maduro is captured before he can even make it to his steel-plated safe room. The whole thing on the ground, over in less than 5 minutes. Incredible.
And this is where it gets, well, really chilling. The source material includes this hypothetical quote from the US president in the scenario. Think about that for a second. It frames this huge, world-changing military action as if it's just entertainment, a TV show. It's a detail that really underscores just how heavy this whole scenario is.
So, after an event like this, you can imagine the entire world is just stunned, right? And the analysis we're pulling from says that the global reaction really boils down to two huge fundamental questions.
First up, why? I mean, what could possibly justify the United States doing something this radical, arresting a foreign leader on his home turf? And second, and maybe even more important, what does this mean for everybody else? If this is something that can happen now, does being your own country, being sovereign, even mean anything anymore? Let's dig into how the source breaks this down.
Okay, so what's the official story? Well, according to this scenario, it's a reason we've all heard before. It's all about drugs. The administration in this story frames the entire thing not as an act of war. Oh no, they call it a law enforcement function.
And to make it look legit, they're basing it on a real indictment from New York. The source points out that the charges are no joke. Narco-terrorism, conspiracy to bring in cocaine, weapons charges, the whole 9 yards. So the story they're selling to the public is, hey, we're just taking down a really bad guy who is hurting Americans.
But, and this is a big but, the source material immediately starts poking holes in that story. It asks a pretty simple question and then pulls up the data to answer it. If this is really about stopping drugs from coming into the US, is Venezuela even the right target?
And this right here is the heart of it. The source presents some numbers that are pretty eye-opening. Guatemala was exporting around 1,400 metric tons of cocaine. Venezuela? The indictment claims maybe 200 to 250 tons. I mean, you do the math. The numbers just don't point to Venezuela as the main source.
And it doesn't stop there. The source also points out, hey, what about fentanyl? The drug causing the most overdose deaths in the US. It has zero established connection to Venezuela. That's a China and Mexico supply chain. So if your real goal was to save American lives from drugs, your choice of target starts to feel a little off, right?
So, if the drug argument is shaky, then what's the real reason? Well, the source argues the answer is simple. It's powerful. And it's black gold. We're talking about oil.
And just look at these numbers. They are absolutely staggering. Venezuela isn't just another oil producer. It has the largest proven crude oil reserves in the entire world. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran. We're talking over 300 billion barrels. That's not just a resource. That is the ultimate geopolitical prize.
Now, to get why this is such a big deal, the source gives us a quick history lesson. For decades, US companies were all over Venezuelan oil. In fact, a lot of our refineries on the Gulf Coast were built specifically to process that heavy Venezuelan crude. But then Hugo Chavez came along, and in 2001, he nationalized the whole industry. Basically, he kicked the US companies out. And ever since then, it's been a deep freeze, with the US hitting them with sanctions.
And this is where the source ties it all together with another one of those hypothetical quotes. The way the fictional president in this scenario sees it, Venezuela didn't just take control of its own oil. No. They took oil away from us. They stole it from America. And that mindset, right there, is presented as the real engine driving this whole operation. Okay, so in this scenario, the motive seems to be oil. But is any of this even legal? Well, the short answer from this analysis is not even close. It's a total violation of the law, both at home, in the US, and around the world.
And the reaction in this fictional world is exactly what you'd expect. It is swift and it is universal. And we're not just talking about the usual suspects like Russia and China. We're talking about America's own neighbors in Latin America, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico. They're all condemning it. Even the head of the UN steps in, calling it a major violation. And the critics in this story have a name for this. They call it New Age colonialism. And that phrase really hits hard, right? The idea is simple. You can call it whatever you want, but if a powerful country invades a weaker one to grab its natural resources, that's just colonialism with the 21st century coat of paint. It's an old, ugly playbook.
The legal mess starts right in the U.S. The Constitution is crystal clear. Only Congress can declare war, period. But in this scenario, the president just doesn't ask them. The White House tries this little workaround, calling it law enforcement. But come on, 150 military aircraft, airstrikes, a citywide cyber attack? That's not law enforcement, that's an act of war.
And on the world stage, it's a blatant violation of the UN Charter. Basically, the #1 rule is you don't use your military to invade another sovereign country. And here's the kicker. While the UN could try to do something, the source points out that the US has veto power on the Security Council, meaning they can block any attempt to hold them accountable. So, zero consequences.
So let's recap where we are in this hypothetical world. We've got an operation that's likely motivated by oil, and it breaks every rule in the book, both domestic and international. The final and maybe most important question the analysis asks is, so what? What happens next? What kind of world does an action like this create?
And the conclusion the source comes to is pretty bleak. It argues that this isn't just one bad action, it tears up the entire international rule book. It creates a world where might makes right. All those rules about respecting other countries and their sovereignty, gone. It becomes the law of the jungle. Because if the biggest player on the board can just ignore the rules, why would anyone else bother to follow them?
And that is really the final, lingering question this whole scenario leaves you with. Sure, it's all hypothetical, but it's designed to make us think about something very real and, honestly, pretty unsettling. It makes you ask, what happens to the rest of us when the most powerful countries on Earth decide the rules, well, that the rules are only for everyone else?